what we like to think now, kind of reverentially, as pro-social change, was really staggeringly traumatic for many, many Southern whites. So we tend to look back on that moment in history, that era in history, with a bit of rose-colored glasses. The reality was people were afraid. And there were many African Americans who felt very uncertain too, because this was uncharted territory for black folks. Not to say that segregation was comfortable, but what was happening in the 60s was new, and the changes that were sweeping across the cities were new too. So after decades of unrest, people in many metropolitan areas, particularly Los Angeles, were just fed up with the fact that many parts of the country were growing and thriving in post-war prosperity, but that prosperity had not visited inner cities. And so people were paying tax dollars and getting in return poorly funded schools, insufficient city services, potholes that weren't fixed, street lamps that weren't replaced when they blew out, terrible access to jobs, very, very little educational success that would prepare them for jobs. So in general, the post-war boom that benefited lots of middle-class Americans was not shared by African Americans, especially those in urban areas. And I think that frustration and that rage just finally erupted starting in 1965 in Watts in Los Angeles. And of course, after Dr. King died and after Senator Kennedy died, that rage and frustration and genuine grief, I think, inspired people in cities across the country. More than 50 U.S. cities were torched. And so I think that to understand why they got torched in the first place, you have to begin by kind of appreciating the fact that there is such tension and uncertainty in the air generally. And then Dr. King's assassination, I think, kind of swept many areas of the country with a sense of despair. Here was this kind of bright, shining light who saw through America's current situation and then imagined a different future that would bring a kind of a new sense of tranquility, kind of a new kind of religion-inspired I lost my train here. So, kind of a new sense of well-being that all of a sudden is cut down. And then the same thing happens to Senator Kennedy, kind of another bright shining light. So I think, given the upheaval of the Vietnam War, frustration with the administration because that war was not going well, I think there was just a general sense of unrest that I really don't think has been duplicated since. So for people who were born in the 90s or the 2000s, I think it's very difficult to appreciate what Dr. King's assassination did, because it's really hard for people to have experienced anything like that, since he was killed.